Okay, I'd wear my mask, but my glasses steam up and I might read the wrong word, so. Okay. All right, have we any apologies? Okay, I think Abdul's not here because he's standing in for Keith Baker at a memorial function. So why he's not here. Moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any comments? Yes?
See if I can, there we go. A couple of things. Page 7, just a clarification, the 5th bullet point under item 6. Clarification on definition of co-opted member vis-a-vis the proposed social media guidance. It wasn't specifically vis-a-vis the social media guidance versus there were 3 definitions that were inconsistent. I've provided Neil with the 3 highlighted copies today, this evening.
Okay.
So just to clarify that one, although the clarification has been useful. And on page 9, the penultimate paragraph, I asked about the potential or the potential for further independent persons, but it was specifically if any people were to apply, would they be accepted in order to increase our diversity of independent persons versus are we recruiting anymore? So I just wanted to correct that, if that would be okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, are you happy to accept that with those corrections? Everybody else? No? Other questions? No? Okay, so you'll put those in, will you? Okay. Okay, and I'll deal with that later on. Okay, is there any declarations of interest in the room? No? Okay, I am a director of one of the housing companies, but that I don't think that affects the. Right, public question times. None received. Okay, they're all in the garden. Okay, member questions. Okay, right. Parish and town council. Okay, update on member conduct, code of conduct. To consider. Who's handling that? You handling that?
Chairman, I'll take that item with your permission.
That's fine.
Good evening, members. This item is really just an update on your detailed consideration that you had at the last meeting, where you agreed to recommend to council the Local Government Association Model Code of Conduct, subject to some small local amendments. And that recommendation is being made to council this Thursday evening. In terms of the report that you've got, as I say, this is a tidying up exercise, I would call it tonight. In terms of the report, there's 2 recommendations specifically for you to consider. So firstly, number 1, the publication of member names when breaches are resolved informally. And secondly, the process for handling complaints made by a town or parish clerk against a councillor. In the body of the report, and in fact, Sally Gurney's already referred to this, that there was guidance sought on some specific issues, and I apologise for the late circulation of the note, but the first 2 issues I've sent a note round to members of the Standards Committee this evening around those. But if I can come back to the 2 substantive points, and perhaps if I could deal with the second point first, and this is around town and parish complaints and the position of the clerk. And the Committee for Standards in Public Life recommended best practice around the chair of the town or parish council acting on behalf of the clerk, should there be an issue between the clerk and one of their councillors. What I would say just on that point is I'm in regular contact with the town and parish clerks. We quite often discuss these issues, and I'm asked to give advice in particular circumstances and situations that clerks might find themselves in. I'm certainly very happy to sort of hear from members of this Standards Committee this evening in terms of any extra things that you think could be done. But certainly from my perspective, I'm quite comfortable at the moment as to how that process works, albeit it's somewhat informal. If I come back though to the first substantive recommendation, so this is an issue that not just at the last meeting, but at previous meetings of the Standards Committee you've considered, and without actually getting to a resolution. So the issue is that under the current process for dealing with complaints, if a member is found to be in breach of the Code of Conduct, but if the complaint is dealt with through the so-called informal route, then the member's name would not be made public. And I know there's different opinions and different views in this committee about this particular issue. What I would like to suggest, Chair, through you, is that I would be very keen to commission an outside expert piece of advice in terms of giving members of the committee the data, the facts in terms of other councils' processes for dealing with Code of Conduct complaints, not just around this specific issue, but I think that there's a number of things that perhaps at the moment are vexing members or are certainly queries. You're seeking more guidance in terms of how other authorities address particular issues. So the council's got a long-standing arrangement, as indeed, in fact, most of the councils in England have got, with an expert organisation that can help to advise both monitoring officers and standards committees in terms of best practice. And what I would like to propose this evening is that through me, you commission that piece of work to report back, and in fact, perhaps to bring the expert to the next committee in October to give you those sort of full facts and figures, so you can make an informed decision as to how you'd like to take that forward. But that is my suggestion, Chair. But again, I'm very happy to sort of hear the debate tonight and see if you could reach a resolution. But I'll pause there and happy to take members' questions on any of those points.
Thank you. How would you like to do this, Mr. Chairman? I've got 4 different points. Do you want to deal with them one at a time because they're on 4 different bits?
No, I think if you deal with them as a piece, and then that gives the opportunity.
So starting in reverse order, as it were, Andrew referring to seeking outside advice, I think that would be very interesting. However, we have done, or Imogen has done, a large amount of research on what other councils actually have in their systems at the moment. She's looked at 20 other councils. So I think it's fine to have an expert to come and advise us about best practice, but I would actually like a report on what other councils do, perhaps the other 6 unitaries in Berkshire and a number of other councils from our comparative groups, for example, or whatever, and all different political complexions, so that we don't get any accusations about it being biased in any one particular direction. I think that would be very handy. So that's the first one. Second one is about the town and parish councils. Perhaps I should declare an interest because I'm also a parish councillor. I think most people around here possibly are also. Is anybody not a parish councillor? Right, Daniel. So on that, I'm quite happy with it as it is. I don't think we need anything extra. I think our clerks are fine as they are, and they would let us know if there was an issue. And I think the responses that we got from the towns and parishes when we did the consultation doesn't indicate that they need a change. So that one I'm quite happy with it as it is. On the informal resolution, it says in the agenda that the bit that will be removed is the bit that's in bold, but I think if you remove that, you leave half a sentence. So I think it means something else, that the whole of that sentence or something like that. I'm quite happy to remove it, but I don't want to just remove the bit in bold, because I think you're left with half a sentence. It says, where there's been a determination by the monitoring officer to resolve the matter informally, comma, and then it goes bold. So I think it's the whole thing needs to go, and I think it does. And I think we've had lots of discussions about this. If you've done something, just because it was resolved informally doesn't mean that you should people shouldn't know about it. I do feel quite strongly about that. The final thing is to do with what's going to council on Thursday. So there's one bit in that which is causing us a problem, and that's the bit about the confidentiality. Now, various people have got different views in our group. We had a long discussion at our group meeting about this, about what the actual implications of it are. I remember discussing this. In fact, I think I've contributed to it in some ways. My concern is that we don't leave councillors uncertain whether something is confidential or not. But the way this has now ended up drafted is not going to work. And some people are deeply suspicious of it. Perhaps I'm less suspicious of it than other people. But I can see that you could end up in a situation where nobody's sure whether they need to ask the monitoring officer. The monitoring officer will end up with a vast load of emails with people asking things, or otherwise it will go the other way. And I worry about we're drifting into a thing where we're, rather than saying everything should be open unless there's a reason for it to be confidential, it's going the other way round. And of course, added on to that, you can take advice from the monitoring officer, but each councillor is individually responsible for their own conduct. So they don't necessarily have to do what the monitoring officer says, but then that could result in a difficulty in a complaint, you know, where there's a difference of opinion whether something should be confidential or not. And I don't think that clears up that thing which is at the nub of it, which is when is something confidential and when isn't it. And I would actually think that at the moment it would be better not to put that to council if we can avoid it, and have another discussion about it. I'm not asking rub it up, we never need to talk about it again, let's overturn everything about it, because I do think there's something not quite right about how we're doing it at the moment. But we need better clarity, and it's going to cause a problem at council, and it'd be better if we just withdrew that one item and left the rest of the standards thing in, which I think we probably agree with, don't we, as a group, and then we could just get through that much more easily and have a further discussion. So those are my points. So I hope that they're helpful. They're supposed to be.
Chairman, if I could respond to Prue's points there, if I could start off with the last one, Prue, and yeah, I totally agree, and I apologise if it's in part sort of my drafting of sort of trying to interpret what the committee said at the last meeting around that. I think it's clause 4.2 that's been added into the model code of conduct. I think the intent, from my perspective, is certainly not to stifle elected members' sort of democratic mandate. It was there as hopefully a sort of helpful reminder to seek the advice of monitoring officer if in doubt. However, I do accept that the way that I've drafted that clause has left it's been interpreted in a different way, certainly, than I intended. So certainly the easiest way in terms of getting what is the vast majority of the model code through council on Thursday evening would just be to remove 4.2 as Prue suggests. Alternatively, I could, again through you, Chairman, suggest some alternative words that perhaps better try to capture the spirit of, I think, what the committee was getting at their last meeting. But I do acknowledge sort of the concerns that Prue's raised about the way that that's been drafted. If I just work back in reverse order, so the question about the informal process and clarity of the wording, yeah, again, perhaps bad drafting on my part in the report, but it would need to say, should you go down that route, that the member's name would be made public should they be found to be in breach, and there wouldn't be that non-disclosure of the member's name should there be found to be a breach.
That's not very clear in this paper. The way it's written, it doesn't appear. It just says it's not. I think you really need to be able to make it clearer that a member has to have breached the rules if you're trying to solve the problem informally, and then that may be more acceptable.
Yeah, no, I totally accept that, Chair. One thing the committee might consider is getting advice on this point. Again, just picking up on Prue's point around getting outside advice and looking at the councils in the country who do still have this process. There are a handful who have this in place, but you could get that objective, independent advice should you choose to seek it on this particular issue itself. Just going back to Prue's second point now, towns and parishes. So yeah, I'd agree from my perspective as monitoring officer. I think it works at the moment. And firstly, the outside advice. Yeah, I'm aware of Imogen's research that she's done, and we'd make sure that that was considered as part of this holistic approach that we'd ask the expert to conduct on our behalf. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, is there anybody else got any questions? Yes.
Thank you. Regarding the informal route, oh, I didn't hear that. I apologise. I saw it looked like you were
You're not talking loud enough. Sorry.
Let Sally go first.
Okay, fine. No.
Sorry, I'm hearing apologies. Regarding the informal route, I have a couple of points. One is that what's been put in the agenda item doesn't match what the suggestions were in the consultation. And I've just been back through the consultation responses that were shared with us, and everybody who responded to it seems to be in favour of publishing the outcome of complaints that are resolved informally, or removing it entirely. Can you explain how that differs to merely not publishing the name? Because to me, outcome is a little bit more detail, which is, I think, what we've all discussed previously, than just that the name was found guilty of something unnamed.
Yeah, if I could take that, Chair. So where a councillor is found to be in breach, and that is subject to a decision notice that is published and is made available on the website, then Sally is correct that it isn't just the name of the councillor, but it's the aspect of the code that the councillor has been breached that is referred to in that decision notice as well. So, as Sally says, there would just be one process, one decision notice at the end of a review of a complaint that would name the councillor and would make clear what aspect of the code of conduct had been breached. Hope that's clearer.
Does that go far enough for you?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, Sally. Okay, Imogen.
Hi there. Okay, my questions. I'm sort of quite concerned about the thing about the town clerks or the parish clerks. You know, they need protection. They need to be able to make complaints directly to the monitoring officer if they need to. I think most of them would, you know, raise the complaint within their own council, of their council group leader, if there was a problem locally. But sometimes that group, that chair, is part of the problem. So I can understand, but I do, you know, believe that they should talk to Andrew, because Andrew can offer good advice as well. But I couldn't support this item. You know, they need to, as any other citizen, be able to make their own complaints. Regarding point,
can I just clarify something?
Sure.
I see what said in this. It's not saying that they can't make a complaint.
Okay.
They're just saying that they need to speak to Andrew first. That doesn't
That's
change
fine.
the situation.
Yeah.
It's if you go to your lawyer and he says you can't win, but you're a Russian oligarch and you've got £45 million in bank, right? You might decide to fight it. So this doesn't take away. It's just advice. And my concern about Imogen is that we have a lot of very new members here.
Yes.
And there are issues, especially around developers and people with lots of money, that if you do something and break the code, okay, and they decide to sue you personally,
Yes.
it would be very difficult for the council to support you. So I think you need to look at how you look at it, whether it's malevolent or benevolent, basically. And I think probably what we were trying to get at was that so you don't make any mistakes, speak to Andrew. I mean,
Yeah,
but you can still
that-
make your judgment.
That isn't a problem, but I do believe the town clerks and parish clerks should have the right to make complaints without having to deal with their own councillors if that's part of the problem. but I'm sure Andrew knows better than anybody, so, because he probably deals with it now. Moving on to the breach of the code of conduct, the point about the subject member's name will not be disclosed. I've sort of been through this mill of the informal route, and some time ago, I know it's well intentioned, but it's become a method to protect people who are guilty, so their names are not published, and it's keeping it outside of the public scrutiny. I certainly feel that if somebody is innocent through using the informal route, then that shouldn't be published. But people who say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm guilty," but maybe there should be something in there so that the person who made the complaint could say, "Actually, maybe we don't want it to be public, or maybe I don't want it taken any further." Having a look at my report I did, and I went around 20 different councils, Harrow, Lancaster, Malvern, different places. There were 14 of them who had an informal route, and almost the only one that didn't make it public, if someone was guilty, was Wokingham. The others didn't make it publicly, but that didn't make it public could proceed to a formal process. So if the complainant was not satisfied, proceed to a formal route, and that was an option for some places. But we're the only one that doesn't publish. Reading does something slightly different. It sends the complaint to the group leaders, the political group leaders first, and so they deal with it first. There's some slightly variance on what people are doing, but Wokingham it seems to be unique in its way. And the fact that people, I mean, I've been there, I've had my name splashed all over the media by what another member has said. I've made the complaint, and the informal, and I got a letter of apology back, and I was told I was not allowed to share that letter, and the name of the person who made the allegation, that name was not shared anywhere. So it took a while, but it seemed to be rather unfair in that method of dealing with things. And and I know that other councillors have had a similar problem. Certainly, if somebody's guilty, it should be public. I think if there was any kind of mediation, there is no mediation. There's no discussions or anything. Then I could see a purpose for this, but there is no discussion with the complainant or the person being complained against. You're just told an outcome. So I would not be inclined to support an informal route. And if there is an informal route, certainly the subject member's name should be disclosed if they're guilty. I'll hang up now.
Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of further research and I think that's and taking outside advice, I think that's a reasonable thing for us to be doing, because I don't see a particular rush to need to have rush into this decision. I think we can, looking at outside perspectives is probably reasonable. But in terms of where my head is at the moment with the informal route and the disclosure of the subject's name, I think I'm in agreement with Prue and Imogen that I'd err on the side of transparency where there's been a breach. But I think let's look at what others do. And if the research comes back similar to what Imogen has discovered herself, then I'd be in favour of disclosure.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm not a member of the Borough Council, so in this context, I'm one of your residents. I'm very aware that your budgets have been slashed. Why are we looking to spend money on something where the Committee of Standards Life says openness and transparency are two of the key principles, where we've already done a consultation with our residents, our parish councils, and those who responded said, yes, please do this, where we've been talking about this as long as I've been on this committee, which is 4-ish years now. Can we just go ahead and do it now?
There's lots of things in the council I'd like to do that with, I must admit, and then some of them got more 4 years. But I think my concern is that this is quite a big move away from where we are today. That to do it without some form of background as to what other people, I mean, we're out of step currently, obviously, from what we're hearing here, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're wrong and they're right. Okay, and I'm just keen that before we jump into this well, that we actually understand we're able to say, well, the reason we're doing it is we've got the consultation, we've had the consultation, but this is the best practice. We know that there's 6 local authorities around us. They're all different colours. You've got Oxford and places like that, and you've got Slough, and we're adopting what we believe is the best practice there.
Chairman, could we have a statement from Andrew about how much it would cost? Because I assumed it was because we belonged, we wouldn't have to pay very much. But
I wasn't going to ask. I was going to ask that question, not necessarily at this meeting, but and yeah, I mean, are you saying that you're going to be spending money?
It would be minimal cost. I think I could assure the committee here. I think and I would say that it wouldn't just be about this one issue that you've been focusing on in terms of the informal route. I think there's other things that may helpfully come back to the committee in terms of helping you make a fully informed decision as to what would work best in the future. So yeah, that's certainly my commitment to this committee, that it would be a low cost piece of desk research that would be minimal cost.
Okay, I mean, my view is that I'm getting some feedback here, but my view is very much about we don't want to be out of step with other councils. I think it's really important that we aren't outliers. We are currently, and I want to put something together that I know that if we take to the council will approve it. And I would feel quite comfortable if I had some background information. I don't have the sort of background information that Imogen obviously garnered over the years through different people, and I'd be a lot more comfortable if I understood where we stood in that. Do you understand what the position? I mean, we battled along with this, as you say, for 4 years, talking about changing it, but it's been in this council in this format for probably 14 years. So it's quite a major change, I think, and even among the different parties, there's some agreement and there's some disagreement. So it's not quite as simple. If we're as a group, I'm going to take this as representative of the group to the council. It's got to be something that I know will get approval. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it.
I think you may well be worth trying to get the residents' views, because the people who support this are our residents. Because I supported it as a resident. Everybody I've spoken to is weirdly flabbergasted that it isn't published. Everybody who has experienced it that I've spoken to who isn't I'm not a member of a political party. Apart from my colleagues, I don't really hang out with people who are politically minded. So it is a surprise to them when they discover this. The people who are concerned about it being published are councillors. I appreciate that getting councillors to vote for something where they're having to be more transparent about something where they may come off looking bad is going to be an uphill challenge. But it's really hard to justify not doing it.
I fully agree with you. I'm also a resident, and I'm staggered that there are no penalties for anybody who breaks any of the rules. And I'd like to change that, but it's not something that I can do. I just think that if we put together something that across the groups we all agree and take it to council and get 100% support of the council, I have the same issue as everybody else. I mean, I don't say in my group, this is what you're going to do. I mean, we have our same, we have different views across our group. And I just think that Andrew's suggestion, and it would appear that Imogen's supportive of that, and Prue is to a degree. I would much rather, if it takes another 3 to 4 months, but we get it right, I'd much rather do that, to be quite honest with you. The worst thing we could do is take something to the council and it just get chucked out. That's my concern.
That would be okay with me.
As I say, I am a resident as well, so and I understand it. I like a bit of transparency. I mean, I try not to have any secrets, because then you can't have any problems. I mean, so to be quite candid with you, There is no such thing as a secret, because as soon as you tell somebody, it's no longer a secret. Anyway, any other questions with regards to? So what are we saying here tonight? We're saying that this paper, in essence, is flawed for two reasons. The first is it's probably not been drafted. That's the wrong word. It hasn't come across as a benevolent. It's come across as malevolent in a lot of cases, and that we can't really come to an agreement on what we do about naming and shaming, if you want to talk about it like that. Yes.
I honestly don't believe it's ready to go to full council yet.
No, I was just getting there. Yeah.
May I make a proposal, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman? And I would propose that we, the report says the committee is asked to agree its preferred approach, and I think we should agree that our preferred approach is to get some external advice and some information about what other councils do, and report back to a future meeting.
Sorry, I agree with you, and I think it's really important that people don't think this is a delaying tactics. I just really want to get this done, and I would urge you to get this information together quickly so we can consider it at the next meeting, okay? And then make some positive decisions.
There is one other point, Mr. Chairman, which we haven't covered, which is about 4.2 that's going to council on Thursday, which isn't actually in this paper, but if we could say that as a committee we'd like to withdraw that and revisit it at our next meeting, I think that would be really helpful. That's the one about councillors and confidentiality and consulting the monitoring officer if you're in doubt about whether something's it's just the wording needs
to be more benevolent,
yes,
basically.
Yes, and I actually think, although Andrew suggested you and he could agree, I think it's a bit of a tough ask to agree it in the next 2 days and get it to council. It would be better to come back to a meeting and do it properly, but there's no doubt about it.
Okay, are you happy to withdraw that from the council meeting? So when the paper's being presented, that we will actually say number 4 is coming out because it's going to be debated at a later date.
Yes, Chairman, if you're asking me, I totally agree with Councillor Bray's suggestion there that it's removed for the purposes of what council consider on Thursday evening.
Okay, right. That's number 4. Okay. You'll let me send me all those details, will you? So I know. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so where we've got to is Andrew's going to go do some work. He's bringing the work back to the next meeting. Okay, and we will then have a discussion where we formulate some fairly concrete suggestions. They will then have to go back to our groups, and then what we can do is we can then recommend them to council once we've felt the weather. Are you all right, Sally? Are you all right with that as well? I don't like delaying things. I'd much rather get them done. But I think that it's been a good argument tonight with regards to keeping us in step with other councils, if nothing else. Okay. Are there any other questions with regards to it? No? Okay. Thank you. Okay, Andrew, I think you're on again, aren't you?
That's right, Chairman. So this is the regular update on Code of Conduct complaints that you receive as a committee. So, I mean, firstly, I'd like to put this into context. We're talking about a relatively small number of complaints across the piece. We're actually looking on Appendix A of 6 complaints at the moment, current complaints. We've had 2 new complaints since the last meeting in March. One of the issues that was raised at the last meeting, and I know is still of concern to members and is indeed a concern to myself as well, is the timeliness of reaching conclusions on these complaints. I will come to a slightly more detailed update on individual complaints in a second. But in terms of actions that I've taken as monitoring officer since the last meeting, we've looked at our capacity, particularly in the legal services team, in terms of being able to transact investigations more quickly. So So we're building that internal capacity to get through an investigation where an investigation is required. Again, I think just going back to your last decision about getting some expert advice, getting some benchmarking information, I think that there'll be some things to learn perhaps in terms of how we might be able to streamline processes, execute the process more efficiently and effectively. But certainly from my point of view, I'm absolutely on the point that the committee has made previously. What I would say is it's also interesting to note that with those 6 complaints, none of them are actually from the public. I know there's one from a town or parish clerk, but the rest are from members about members. I make no comment about that other than to just bring that to the committee's attention. So if I just move on to Appendix A and just go through the 6 current that you've got, it does refer to having verbal updates this evening. So firstly, there's the oldest complaint that we've still got on our books, and if you recall, this complaint is going to a hearings panel. We have had at least 2 dates arranged, one very firm date and one provisional date. I'm still through the clerk. We haven't quite confirmed the final date, but I'm hopeful that we can get a date in August to transact that. It has been too long for all involved, but I would hope now, trust now, that we're close to being able to get that in front of a member hearing panel for those members to decide whether or not there's been a breach in that particular case. If I then move on to the second on your list, so this is the complaint that came in on the 26th of November. So this complaint it was surrounding allegations of confidentiality, which I think has been a bit of a theme this evening for the committee. This went to investigation. Again, I think there were some issues on my part in terms of the timeliness of that, but equally it wasn't necessarily that easy to actually transact or conduct the investigation. However, the investigation concluded, and it concluded that there was no breach of the code of conduct. The member concerned has been informed today of that, as indeed has the complainant. So that particular complaint, the second oldest complaint, has been dealt with. I've then got 2 complaints from last Christmas that are from a town and parish council. It's from the same town and parish council. I'm still in conversations with the clerk as to how best to deal with those particular issues. Neither, I would say, are of an exceptionally serious magnitude, if I can put it that way. But again, it's not acceptable to me that we're sitting there 7 months after those complaints came in without a resolution to those. So again, I would ask for the committee's patience with those, but certainly from my perspective, I would be seeking within the next month to have both of those concluded, to be able to report back to the members concerned and to this committee. And then finally, there were 2 more recent complaints that came in last month. Again, those are close to being getting towards the end of the process in terms of determining the outcome of both of those, but we're not quite there yet. So that's a sort of snapshot of where we are. But again, I'd be very happy to take any detailed questions that members have got, but also very keen to hear members' views around how we might do further things to improve the timeliness of our processes. Thank you, Chairman.
Question? Sally?
Are the December complaints and the June complaints, are they tit for tat complaints or are they unrelated?
They're unrelated.
Okay, thank you.
So approved.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the investigations, because I heard Andrew say, I think, more legal people to do it. I wonder whether that is the right course of action. Because when you get a lawyer involved, they tend to deal with things in a very lawyerly way, rather than in a pragmatic, sensible way. And they're also quite expensive. Is there really nobody else who's able to conduct an investigation into a fairly simple complaint that we could enlist to do this? I don't know who that might be. I mean, I know in the past you've used people who from the benefits team who are used to asking people questions about their things, and that there are other people in the council who deal with other sorts of complaints that people get. Can we not ask them to instead, or somehow use that resource differently? And the only other point I wanted to make is although we have got long, they've been there a while, we don't actually have a great volume of complaints, and I'll be very reluctant to put any restrictions on who could complain about whom. I am aware of councils, and they mainly seem to be Labour controlled, where the Labour councillors make complaints about everybody else all the time. And I mean, literally hundreds of complaints. We don't have that culture. I wouldn't like to have that culture. There is a little bit of tit for tat, I think, but not much. So I don't think there's any need to restrict anything. I think if we suddenly got 30 or 40 complaints in a month or something like that, the workload will be impossible, and we might have to think about something. But at the moment, it's relatively low. And although things don't always get upheld, they're not frivolous. They're not vexatious type complaints. They are people who generally think something has gone wrong somewhere on the whole. So I don't think we've got too much to worry about, but I would like to see quicker investigation and not necessarily legalistic investigations.
Yeah, Chairman, just on the point about other teams within the council, I think Prue makes a really good point there, and that's an action that I'll take away to see how we might build some capacity elsewhere. And I mean, an obvious place would be internal audit. They've got the skills. So I'll pick that point up and report back to the committee.
Yes, we are changing the way that we use our own legal team anyway, and we're trying to embed our legal team into the council. So rather than giving advice after the event, they give advice before the event. So before anybody signs any document, it goes in front of a lawyer. I'm staggered that that's never happened, but it's never happened in the past. Now, nobody can sign any major contracts without it being in front of our lawyers, because what we need to understand is if it goes wrong, how do we get out of it? Imagine being saddled to some of these less industrious councils at the moment financially. It would be extremely embarrassing, and we could find ourselves dragged down with them. We are very much looking at, again, you need to look at it in a benevolent rather than malevolent, and we're not saying to people, you can't do this. We're saying these guys are here to help advise you. So when I spoke to somebody in Children's Services, they spent £1 million on legal services with Reading, and when I challenged them, they said, well, we're not, and this was 2 years ago, we're not really legal people, we don't understand it. So what we do is we won't train our own legal people to do it, but they will become the intelligent client, so they can at least say you're getting value for money, or this is the right thing. And I think that this having a shop of legal where you have to put your hand up and it comes out your budget, I think is not the right way to use our legal talents. We've got some really good legal people in this council, and I think that it's important that people start to realise that it's cheaper to get it done at the front than it is trying to do it at the back. So I agree with you, Prue, but I do hope that we're part of that embedding of these people. It's a bit like we've done with finance, where Graham Evers has people in each of the departments now who actually help, and they do help people like children's services and adult services. I mean, so we've seen that with Carol Camis coming in under budget this year, okay, without really damaging the service. In fact, if anything, she's improving the service. So yes, I do agree with you. I wouldn't want to go out and start paying lawyers to do this, and I think it needs to become one of the functions that the council does itself. Now, at what sort of level we write those reports and what sort of training we give people, There will always be times when an allegation will be serious and we may need some legal advice. But I think you're right. Under most of these, he said this, she said that, or the other way round. I think that should be able to be dealt with at quite a, not a junior level, but a middle management level in the council. Any other questions? Yes.
Hello, good evening. It was just a quick thought. You just said 2 new complaints. Are they similar to the ones in the paper already?
Yes, they are the last 2 complaints on Appendix A. So they came in June.
Oh, thank you. That's okay. Oh.
I mean, one of the things about, and I think this is important, one of the things of looking at outside councils is to find out how long they take. Because to me, it seems in an ordinary length of time, it's unfair to the person who's made the allegation. It's unfair to the person who's had the allegation made about them for it to drag on for 18 months. I mean, say, because even the most hardened councillor sits there with it in the back of their mind, knowing that it's going on, and we need to resolve that as quickly as possible.
Chairman, I'm aware of at least one council in the country who routinely pay barristers to conduct their investigations and interview people. I think that's rather a scary way to go about it.
Well, I think I'd have a problem getting the budget out of Graham Evans for that, to be honest with you. Any more questions? Anybody want to say anything else? No? I think that. Okay, that's the end of the agenda. Thank you, everybody, for coming along on this lovely evening. So that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.